One of my favorite parts about Nuxt.js is how easy it is to sprinkle in some TypeScript with your Vue projects. Okay, so if you aren't already on board with TypeScript, don't be intimidated by this lesson. We're going to use Nuxt.js in this course as a bit of an introduction to TypeScript if you aren't already familiar with it. And if you are already familiar with it, it's going to help you get a little bit hands on and use it in a practical way. So, what I want to do in this lesson is I want to model what the data for our application will look like. What do I mean? Well, over on the right hand side here is Trello, and we're going to be working with two main types of data. We're going to be working with data for the columns that make up the board and the data for the tasks that are within a column. Okay, so how do I want to model that out with TypeScript? Well, first, let me create a directory over here called types. Naming this types isn't technically required, it's just a good convention for a place to store our TypeScript types. Then inside this directory, I'll create a file called index.ts. Awesome. So let's start by modeling the column type of data. I'll create an interface called column, and we'll say that our columns have to be objects that contain three properties. First, they'll need a title property, which will always be a string. This corresponds to the title at the top of the column. Also, all of our columns will need unique IDs because of the way Vue Draggable works. We'll end up generating these IDs with Nenoid, so we'll ultimately get a string. Just to be a little more semantic though, let me create a type called ID and set it to string, and then use that type as the ID type for my column. This isn't strictly necessary for our use case, but it could be nice later on if for some reason we changed out to auto-incremented IDs that become numbers. All of our resources that have IDs could be changed out to that numeric value simply by changing the type of ID. Alright, lastly, each of the column will include an array of tasks. These are each of the tasks that are within the column. Okay, great. Now let's define that task interface. Our tasks are going to be super simple. If we were to click on an individual task here in the actual Trello application, we'd get a pop-up where there is a lot more data attached to each task. We aren't going to get into this view though, so really all we're concerned with is the text for the task. I'll call that title, which will be a string. And let's also keep up with when the task was created. Why not? That should be a date. Awesome. Now, just like column, we should also assign a unique ID to each of our tasks. And just because I'm a stickler for consistency, let me move ID here in column up to the very top as well. Excellent. So this is one really nice thing about TypeScript. It allows us to think about the shape of our data before we even start actually coding. Not only have I been able to relay the information to you in a straightforward way, but I've also been able to flesh this out in my own mind as well. Awesome. Lastly, let's just export each of these different types and interfaces so they'll be available outside of this file. In the next lesson, we'll start using these types to type some static data, start getting some HTML on the page, and start styling it all with Tailwind CSS.